Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this webinar today on behalf of the African Energy Commission of the African Union, the Clean Energy Innovation Partnership, and the South Center. We'd like to welcome you to today's webinar on sustainable energy for Africa, transition through growth, how to boost output, improve access, and reduce impact on the nature and society, technologies, scenarios, strategies, sources of finance, and business models. A long title. Before I hand over to our two moderators today, Dr. Rashid Ali Abdallah, the Executive Director of the African Energy Commission, and Professor Yoba Sokona, who is the Senior Advisor on Climate Change and Sustainable Development of the South Center and the Vice Chair of the IPCC. Just a few logistical notes. So this webinar today will be screened on Zoom, and at the same time, there will be a live streaming on YouTube. For the ones on the Zoom, you can pose your questions using the chat function. And for the ones attending via YouTube, you can send your questions directly via email to the following email address. That's info.ceipartnership@gmail.com, info.ceipartnership@gmail.com. Okay, so with that, I'll hand over to our moderators. Many thanks and enjoy.
Okay, thank you very much, Raj. Dear all participants who joined us, distinguished panelists, it is my great pleasure to have you all with us in this webinar. For the past weeks, Africa and its partners have been engaging stakeholders across the continent and the world and on various topics related to the energy in Africa. And in particular related to the impact presented by COVID-19 pandemic. As much as this discussion around the pandemic are becoming common and popular, the impact is inevitable and cannot be ignored. In our discussion, speaker and participants, all of them have indicated how imperative is energy transition, and how the sharing of the practice and lesson learned is a crucial and important aspect in transforming the African economy through research and development. I am therefore pleased that this discussion are giving us as a direction and extent of the work that Africa, and especially Africa, and it is all industry players have to do to create systematic continental-wide approach to identify problem, solution, and innovation, which will harness the wider continent energy transition and integrated process for benefit of our people. The energy sector is the key driver to reduce inequality between and within country and region. So, if we are serious about energy development in Africa, this success is dependent on African leadership and ownership of this process. This is therefore the time to fully mobilize Africa's own energy resources and potential by bringing energy, its integration and transition as the forefront of the national and regional agenda. Taking into the consideration the setback which the government will continue to endure during and after the pandemic, approach which will put Africa directly to innovate, adaptation of low carbon energy development pathway, building a community of practice for knowledge sharing and mutual learning to string our system across Africa are crucial elements to relook and realign our system. We should really look at investing in building the energy infrastructure for post-economic and social development, starting with agriculture, which is the largest Africa employer, but remain under development to the level of the sustainable production across the continents. The progress and the investment our government making should provide shared benefit to the people across the continent. We should carefully consider of possible national, regional, and intercontinental gas pipeline, development of an integrated African electricity network, increase energy sustainability and security for all. This kind of possibility become even clear, providing necessity during the cross-border trading between country or region during this time of pandemic and beyond this time of beyond the time of the pandemic. Therefore, it is a duty of every individual, business, or institution to sensitize and mobilize decision makers to steer energy transition and the need for investment in energy. Development of wide continental regulatory framework in mark for the intervention and building of Africa capacity. Africa, with its own production and distribution of energy resource, are sufficient for the continent. We just have to strengthen value chain rooted in the local and national reality. I am therefore very pleased to have been part of this learning and knowledge sharing approach to help Africa develop a distinctive pathway and action plan tailored for development and transformation of the energy sector on our continent. I would also like to thank all participants who have joined us in this webinar and the previous webinar. At the same time, we are very honored to have a panel of experts in our modest who will share their idea, expertise, and knowledge and know-how, and also to tell us how Africa can learn and build the Africa we want. I am very pleased to introduce our speakers, Mr. Mohamed Sow, CEO of EDF Côte d'Ivoire, Mr. Modibo Diko, consultant in area of solar energy in the health supply chain management and innovation and former WHO project coordinator, Mr. Muhammad Adu, Director of Power Shifts Africa. And also, I'm very sorry that Mr. Baha Sahu, Acting Executive Director of ECOWAS Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency, will not join us for very special reason, reason so that he cannot join us, but he sent his greeting and wish have a good discussion in this webinar. By this introduction remark, I will hand over to Yuba.
Thank you, Rashid. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. And then thanks again for joining us to this second webinar in deepening some of the issues we just highlighted in the previous one, to be much more concrete, to be much more specific, and then that will tie to the real issues in the ground. For the panelists, we'll have one question. This is the same question for each of you. Please do not spend more than 3 minutes. You can elaborate on when there will be a specific question to you. And then this overall question to each of you, and I will announce your name before you just start responding. We are in the midst of the pandemic. Africa is not thinking about the recovery package. We are in the midst of the pandemic in Africa. And then facing economic downturn and other complexity requiring immediate actions. Is it the right time now in Africa to discuss sustainable energy for all and transition through growth? Or we should better focus on urgent measures and control damages? And then let me start with So. You have 2 or 3 minutes just to articulate your vision on that question.
Okay, so thank you very much to everyone, to the organizations and to the higher level panelists to giving me this opportunity to join you and to share our point of view. But just before entering and elaborating on this really interesting and specific question, just to give you a quick overview of EDF, which is the structure that I represent in Côte d'Ivoire. EDF, in brief, is one of the first electricity company, or the #1 producer of nuclear energy in the world, the #1 producer of renewable energy in Europe, and is involved, I would say, in any aspect, every aspect of the energy sector, so generation, transmission, distribution, supply, and services. Quick figures, it's an international presence in 23 countries. It's around 70 billions of sales and around 130 gigawatts installed capacity. To enter and directly address and give an answer to this question, I think it's the right time to discuss this really important matter. Just to give you 2 examples, the first one is that EDF also, during this pandemic crisis, has made a communication in regard of their raison d'être and highlight in this raison d'être their point of view of focusing on renewable energy, focusing on how to impact on social, on economic development. So during this crisis. The second example also I would like to take into account is that due to the measure that we had to consider during the pandemic, this pandemic crisis, I think we all had to experience the lockdown measures that we had to experience, and that we have been pushed to largely, I would say, prioritize teleworks, and on some also specific aspect, also some teleschools. And in order to achieve that, it was important for I would say the majority of people that could do these teleworks or teleschools to have access to energy and access to internet. Unfortunately, on our continent, when you take into account, I would say, the access to energy rate that is still into account, it's only around 40%. So it means that it's really important, I would say, to address this challenge and to trying to improve this question on regarding the place of sustainable energy in Africa. Another aspect also I would like to mention is that today sustainable energy development, I would think it is the concern of many countries, because when you take a look at the energy policies, they all integrate, I would say, projects. They all integrate energy, renewable energy mix into their energy policy. I would say that today the discussion and the challenge is to see how we can implement those energy policy and how we can accelerate their implementation. And that for us, and what we believe is the main challenge. And for this, we have to find, I would say, the right recipe between what can bring the private sector, what can, of course, push the public sector, and all, I will say, the stakeholders that are pushing in that way. That will be.
Thank you. We will come back later on some of the aspects you just highlighted, and particularly the private sector issue. And Modibo Diko, the same question. Do you want me to repeat the question, or you got it? 2 or 3 minutes, just to get things warm. Is your microphone on? Diko, your microphone is muted.
Yes. Sorry, I was muted.
Okay.
So for me, there is no way to focus only on urgent pandemic control measures. Indeed, the coronavirus is not a vaccine against all other diseases. Those continue to hit the population, and therefore they must be faced. And as you know, and you always say, power is an indispensable enabler to provision of quality healthcare. That's what you all say. Without power, we face numerous challenges. First, challenge to set health systems, for instance, the vaccine cold chain, in places where there is no electricity, for instance. Challenges regarding data transfer. We need electricity to record and transmit data from all the places where we have health facilities. We need electricity for lighting, for instance, for healthcare provision after daylight. And we need energy just for simple hygiene, water and sanitation and hygiene, sterilization, etc. Hot water to clean babies, for instance. And we have human resource challenges. Trained healthcare workers may not stay for long in facilities without good access to electricity. We have seen that in many places. And we have community challenges also. Population may not trust facilities because they had previous experience of being turned away due to electricity-reliant health service not being available. So as you can see, we cannot stop providing healthcare because diseases continue to hit, and we cannot provide healthcare without power. So there is no way for us to stop thinking about how we continue to provide sustainable energy supply to health and stop that and then focus only on emergency related to pandemics. We must do both. That's my standpoint. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think that you asked some of the challenging aspects, how to deal with those massive challenges in the continent. Thank you for. And Mohamed Ador, do you want me to repeat the question or you got it?
No, I got it. Thank you, Yuba.
Okay.
So, so we are in a very radically different new world. We're living through unprecedented health, social, economic emergency. And this is coupled with the climate crisis. You know, COVID is affecting all our countries. There's no single African country that has not been affected. And it's affecting in such a way that we're now seeing those far-reaching health, social, and economic impacts. So for me, it's not about one crisis or challenge replacing the other. These are clearly intertwined and interrelated. And so the approaches and solutions must speak for each of the crises in a way that we can address them together. So if you take the example of the health crisis, and I want to start with this, and look at the root causes for the challenge we're now facing, it's largely because we've actually destroyed our ecosystem. The root causes for the pandemic, the way I see it, is because of the industrial, modernized agribusiness and ecosystem destroying development model that has actually escalated diseases jumping from the wild to human populations, and so causing the pandemic. And if you look at this, these are the very same mindset, this very same vested interest that are also causing the climate crisis. And so the way to think about this and the way to approach this is actually take energy as an enabler and use it as an entry point for taking holistic, approach to addressing these crises. So it means designing a new local economic model that allows us to be able to meet the needs of our people where they live and where they work, and building their resilience, which is crucial for dealing with the pandemic. So addressing the energy crisis, enabling people to be able to access the available energy is key for developing the healthcare systems that we require. So if we're going to be thinking about providing healthcare, if we're going to be thinking about providing social services and social protection, the entry point for the delivery of these services is actually energy. So enabling access to energy is actually going to allow us to be able to address the health crisis, the development crisis, and the environmental and climate crises. And so if we want to be effective in our response, take the opportunity that we have now and shift our people to be able to actually meet the energy requirements by exploiting the incredible potential renewable energy provide, because that is effectively going to allow us to be able to meet their needs now, but also build their resilience for the future crises and future pandemics that may occur. And so for us as organizations and individuals, we need to exercise our freedom, our intellectual space to be able to deal with multiple perspectives and issues at the same time. We can't say we'll deal with one and then pack the other one for later. I think we can deal with these things together at the same time and help our government realize clever solutions in a way that we can actually be able to avoid jumping
But how
to the
can we do that at the same time if you have limited resources, financial, human, and institutions?
So it's imperative for us to actually think, what is it going to take to mobilize the resources that are required to deal with the pandemic, but also at the same time deal with the related environmental and climate crises. I don't think we can avoid doing these things together. The lessons I think we've learned in climate is you cannot deal with the climate crisis or the environmental crisis if you don't deal with the challenge of mobilizing the resources that are required. And so one of my substantive input in this conversation is actually thinking about what the West owes the developing world. And I published recently an essay in the Foreign Affairs, which addresses the question of climate debt that I wanted to actually bring into this conversation so that we think about, if we require financial resources, if we require technological resources, if we require the capacity building so that we can undertake the transformation that is required to be able to deliver the transition, for example, to 100% renewable energy, then we need to be addressing those challenges in a way that we can unlock the support. So I strongly believe, Yuba, that we require, seriously, technology, and I'm talking here about clean technology. We need access to socially and environmentally appropriate technologies. We require access to finance. We require to be able to mobilize effective global cooperation at a massive scale. And the way I want to actually think about each of these things is we're in an unprecedented time in the history of the world, a time when we must act urgently to be able to deal with the climate crisis. But we cannot do that if we don't mobilize unity, if we do not present clarity, if we do not defend the sanctity of life of people on this planet. So I think there are growing sets of crises with the pandemic, with the climate, with the environment, and they're all caused by this one system. And that system is one that is dominated by elites' interest and fundamentally opposes the interests of people everywhere. And for me, the way to do these things is to bring these agendas closer together so that we can be able to protect the harmony and integrity of the planet, but also the people of the planet.
Okay, thank you. We can come back to some of those aspects, and then some of the speaker also may step in. And Dimitri, now, do you want me to highlight the question, or do you have them?
No, I have it. Thank you very much.
Okay.
I think lots of very good points were made. In particular, I fully agree with Mr. Diko that this pandemic is not a vaccine against all previous problems which we faced. And some of these problems, they still exist and they actually even become worse sometimes. So I think, yes, even in this time, we should look at long-term consequences of our measures. Even short-term measures have long-term consequences. So now we have to react on what's going on. We have to stop pandemic, but selecting specific measures, we also should kind of consider long-term consequences, and when we select certain measures, and this measure should work on our strategies. Also, we have to use this opportunity, if we may say so, to revisit our strategies, because this challenge with COVID and economic downturn is a challenge for our strategies, and our strategies for energy transition, for sustainable development, should be resilient to such challenges. So yes, I think it's right time to consider strategic and long-term subjects such as energy transition now. but it should be done not instead of short-term measures, but in conjunction. So this is my short answer.
Okay, thank you. We have been warned, and then let me hand over to Rashid, and then to get on the substantive questions. Rashid?
Okay, thank you very much, Yuba. Really, I like this saying that COVID-19, it is not a medicine for all our diseases. And really, I like this saying. My question to Mahman Sow, you know, this, as I highlight in my opening remark, this time we need to base on lesson learned. And based on that, and based on your experience, we have in Africa based as you go, as one experience that people have it. But we think that it is not spread enough to the in all African continent. What's the impact? What you think the lesson learned from that, and why it is not spread enough in the continent? And what's the impact, if any, of COVID on collection consumer payment for the electrical power system?
Thank you very much for the question. So maybe just before elaborating on the lesson learned, let me give you or maybe explain what we are doing in Ivory Coast on this specific sector. So in regard of pay-as-you-go, or so-called solar home system. So we have created in late 2016 a joint venture between EDF and one of what was already an important actor in solar home system business, which is Zola Electric, formerly called OGE. So we have developed this joint venture in late 2016 with the idea to deploy a solar home system solution on rural area everywhere in Ivory Coast. So what is a solar home system? It's based with a solar panel, with a battery, with some lights. So it's a totally integrated solution. You also have a fan, you also have a TV, and we are performing the installation. We are providing the after sale. We are giving a warranty of 5 years. And we also are providing a financial facility. So we give the possibility to our customers to pay back the system on a 3 years range on a monthly basis. So it's an all integrated solutions that we are able to install, and that is able to change somehow the life from one day to another of our customers that are based in rural areas. Also, what point I would like to highlight is, in order to provide these financial facilities, so we had to structure a specific vehicle in which EDF, Meridiam, and Mitsubishi are partner as equity sponsors, but we also manage to interest some bank institutions. So the AFDB is providing somehow a debt in order for us to provide this facility to our customers. Also with Societe Generale and CACIB. So we have also been really innovating on how to structure the financial vehicle for this kind of project. And one of the first lessons that I would like to share with you is that in order to, I would say, allow all those stakeholders to play a part in this project, it has been somehow really difficult to allocate the risk, especially the operational risk and the financial risk in a project finance, I would say, scheme. And this took us a lot of time to, I would say, structure the financing of this project. And it was, in terms of timing, quite similar to, I would say, an IPP scheme, an IPP negotiation. So that's one of, I would say, the first lesson that I would like to share with you, is that even if the solution is here and is ready to be implemented, it needs a lot of financial resources And in order to find the right schemes to implement, I would say, this kind of solutions, it's not so easy, I would say, to address and to align the interests of all the stakeholders. So one of the lessons learned that we are going to apply, I would say, on our next way of implementing those projects is to put some simplification and to simplify this model. Today, in Ivory Coast, we have around 40,000 customers that are benefiting on this solution. And what is key is also to be able to provide this solution at an affordable price for our population. So that's why we need to be innovating on how to finance it. We need to be innovating on how, in terms of logistics, to implement it. The second lesson learned I would like to share is that this model, this specific model, the solar home systems, when we enter into discussion with the authorities, with the government, was at their first point of view considered as, I would say, a model that enter into opposition with, I will say, with the classic model of grid extension, I would say conventional electrification. So it was difficult to have some support from governments that were already involved and engaged on extending the grid, on investing on important infrastructure in terms of network and in terms of how to connect, I would say, the populations to the grid. So it has been a long time discussions to convince them that those models could be complementary, because of course, I would say grid extension model takes time, needs a lot of investment, most of the times cannot, I would say, in terms of financial contribution, cannot involve private sectors, because it's difficult to find, I would say, a profitable model in order to extend the network. You can find one in terms of how to develop the generation capacity, but in terms of grid extension network, most of the times I would say it is bared by the government. So it has been, I would say, a long time discussion to convince the government in Ivory Coast that those models could be complementary. And after 3 years of operation and observation of how we were performing on the ground, they finally decided to integrate those models within their strategy. So that will be, I would say, also my main second lesson learned is to try and to find a way to make the government, I would say, to appropriate those kind of models and to find for them a place to this model in their strategy. Because what we can see on the ground is that with those solutions, we can be much more faster by connecting, I would say, new customers than waiting for the grid extension, especially in some really specific areas. Regarding the second question in terms of impact, especially during the COVID, the impact has been, of course, major. Why? Because especially on the payment collection rate, like I mentioned before, we are, I would say, implementing this solution affordable, and we are relying 100% on mobile money solution. So our solar home system can work only if our customer is up to date with his payback plan. If he stop paying, the solar home system will automatically stop working. And after a very, very, very long period of not paying, we will have the opportunity to, I would say, uninstall this solar home system. So it has been for us, of course, during this pandemic. We did not want it to uninstall, but it is true that during this pandemic, because our customers are farmers, our customers, most of them are living with the agriculture economy revenues, and they have been impacted by the COVID. So by consequence, it has, I would say, decreased our payment collection rate. But it has been also for us a way to find some, I would say, solidarity plan in order to accompany them. The under impact of the COVID-19 is that those solar home systems are unfortunately not manufactured in Africa at the moment. They are all imported. So for us, it has been also very difficult, and I think from all the actors of these sectors to be able to pursue, I would say, the implementation, because it was difficult to import in Ivory Coast, but I think in many countries in the world, the solar home system in order to install them. But also, what is interesting is that even though they are manufactured most of the time in Europe or in Asia, all the team that is involved in their installation, in their I would say after sales, in their maintenance, in the logistic, are people that we have trained in Ivory Coast, and so we did not have, we did not need to rely on, I would say, international experts to have, I would say, an activity that could continue in Ivory Coast. So we were the chance is that we have focused, like many actors of these businesses, on local resources. And so for that, it has not created a huge impact in comparison, I would say, to electricity generation or I would say networks maintenance that I think in some countries in Africa have suffered due to the fact that some experts were not anymore able to travel to perform some really high level specific operations. That will be, I would say, my first contribution. Yeah.
Okay, really, thank you very much. I'm very happy to hear this exercise, and I see that now the utility, it is emerging as the new player in terms of this decentralized system, which is, I think, it's important for energy transition. Really, I'm very happy, and it will be good even we look further in this practice and how it will be transferred to the other area. I think I hand over to Yuba, and we'll come back to you again for further question. Yeah, Yuba. Yuba, is a mic, your mic.
Diko, I said that I know that you are very pragmatic, and then you look at the concrete solutions, and then you are motivated by solving problems. I do have two questions to you, and if you can, within 10 minutes, try to articulate your approach to those two questions. The first one is, what are the major constraints of the African energy systems to support the health sector, and how can this be addressed? Diko so just indicated the solar home system. Is there any solar home system that can provide those kind of services? And then the second, it's a bit tricky. Suppose we have a vaccine in the coming few months, let us say 3, 4, or 1 year. And then do we have in Africa adequate energy service, for instance, for cooling, to reach out to all parts of the continent and in particular the rural areas? If not, what are the prerequisites in support of energy? And that's related also to the first aspect you already started to allude to. Is it clear, or do you want me to repeat again?
No, it's very clear.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much for those questions. It's not a surprise for you when I say that in the area of energy supply to health sector, we have a lot of constraints. The first one is the non-availability of grid electricity in most part of the countries. On average, in the sub-Saharan Africa, the African region of WHO, about 60% of health facilities do not have access to grid electricity. 60%. That's the average. This can go as high as 80% in countries like Burkina Faso or Niger, and even as high as 95% in a country like DRC. So you can imagine the problem. On average, 60% of health facilities do not have access to electricity. That's the first constraint and a big one. The second constraint is that even those facilities which have access to electricity do not have a reliable access to electricity. They face frequent breakdown of electricity supply, frequent cutoff, and they have voltage fluctuations that impact devices, electric devices, etc. Data suggests that only 34% of hospitals have access to reliable electricity. And when we look at health facilities, only 28% of those health facilities which have access to electricity have reliable electricity supply. So you can see the scale of the problem. 60% have no access, and among those which have access, only 34% of hospitals have reliable electricity. Only 28% of health facilities have reliable electricity. The next constraint is the high cost of the electricity bill. For health facilities, very often the electricity bill is beyond their capacity, their financial capacities. So that's also a major constraint. What are the solutions? I think it's not surprising for you when I say it's renewable energies, particularly solar. We have solar energy available everywhere across the countries. And a lot of progress has been actually made in the promotion of solar energy. Let me say that in 2014, more than 60% of cold chain equipment, mainly refrigerators and freezers, were absorption types, meaning they used kerosene or gas to operate. These were very low performing equipment, difficult to maintain in the proper temperature for keeping vaccines safe. And also they were producing, what do you call them? Greenhouse gases during their operations. So from 2016, the Vaccine Alliance called Gavi came out with a project called Cold Chain Equipment Operation Platform, which is funded by several donors. And from 2017 to now, most absorption refrigerators have been replaced with solar direct drive refrigerators. Solar direct drive refrigerators have solved the problems we had with the first generation of solar refrigerators linked with batteries. Batteries were not reliable and they did not last long, and they were often used also to supply energy for other needs than the refrigerator. it was like the energy was stolen from the refrigerator for other needs. So solar direct drive, they have a big quantity of liquid in their walls, and during daytime, the compressor works very hard to freeze that liquid in the walls of the system. And during nighttime, before that thaws, we have a good maintenance of the temperature. So they get rid of the batteries. So it's a very reliable system now, which is being installed everywhere. From 2017 to 2019, about 29,000 of those systems were installed by CCOP in 27 countries. And the process is continuing. We need to deploy more of these solar direct drives in the countries. We need to expand the capacity of the existing cold chain. We know that these 29,000 systems which were installed represented just almost half of the need of the countries, you see. And we also need to extend the cold chain to facilities where initially there is no refrigerators. By this way, we will increase the access to vaccines and other medicines also. Another constraint which I can say in this area is the problem with qualified human resources and lack of companies for maintenance of cold chain installations. So that's a constraint which must be addressed. Coming to the second question, we are in a much better situation now to introduce a new vaccine if it becomes available. Countries have the experience of introducing new vaccines in their program, thanks to the support from Gavi and UN organization. Since the year 2000 to now, several vaccines have been introduced in the immunization programs across the countries. So they have the experience of introducing new vaccines. Sometimes even if the vaccine is requesting specific conditions, like the Ebola vaccine in Guinea, which required to be stored at -80 degrees. So Guinea succeeded to put in place a cold chain at -80 degrees to support that introduction. So countries have the experience. This is a big thing. The second thing is that solar energy is available everywhere and it's affordable now. I remember in the 80s, a 50-watt peak panel costed 250,000 CFA. 250,000 CFA, which is about 500 USDs for a 50-watt peak panel. Today, you have a 250-watt peak panel at less than $200. So the prices has fallen down, which makes solar energy available for powering refrigerators, freezers, temperature monitoring devices, and communication devices everywhere in the country. The third thing is the availability of internet in most areas now in the countries. So this can be used for data transmission and also for distance training of health workers. So this also increase the reliability of the cold chain, because we can also use remote temperature monitoring to see what's happening with the cold chain everywhere in the country, thanks to internet. So there is, we have really good conditions now to succeed in covering the countries with a cold chain to sustain the introduction of a new vaccine. And also there is a momentum at political level. You all were at the Clean Energy for Healthcare Conference in Nairobi last year. So there is a sensitization of the governments on the issue of supplying energy to the health sector. However, we need to address some differences of perspective between health sector and the energy sector. The health sector needs energy now to provide vital services to the population now. But the energy sector would like to create a solid local and professional energy environment for all. And so these two perspectives sometimes do not match. You can see, for instance, you solarize a health facility with plenty of money, and 3 months later, you hear that the electricity grid will reach that village. So that kind of things are detrimental for the success. So there is a real need to talk, to strategize, and to plan together between the ministries of energy and the ministries of health. The other thing, I already mentioned it, is we need to improve the maintenance capacity through strengthening human resource for maintenance, for installation and maintenance, and also to increase institutional capacities in both the public sector and private sector. Sometimes a good public-private partnership can do a lot of things. The last thing I would mention is also the need for academia to support this effort, to prepare technicians and engineers, workers who can support the introduction and the maintenance of all those systems. So that's my say for that now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That's excellent. And I think that you brought the three perspective of each of the cluster, the policy, the practice, and then the knowledge cluster need to work together in order to provide some solution to this pressing issue. Now, let me hand over to Rashid.
Okay, thank you, Yuba. My question, it is for Muhammad Adu. I think you mentioned that you published recently some articles in Foreign Affairs. And in that article, you raise important issue of sourcing funds for climate change, adaptation, and in particular for renewable energy project in Africa. We need to know more about your paper, and also what do you consider the most important financial tools and mechanisms for that?
Thank you. I think let me start by just sharing some facts and reminding us some of the things we know. And I'll take the year 2017, which is the year when we have the latest data on global greenhouse gases emissions. The world emitted 53.5 gigatons of carbon dioxide equivalent in 2017. Africa's share of the global greenhouse gases emissions remains very small at around 3 gigatons carbon dioxide equivalent per year. And this accounts for around 3.8% of total greenhouse gases emissions annually. Although, you know, our continent is home to about 17% of the global population. And the reason, you know, our emissions are low is closely related to the fact that we have the lowest energy consumption per capita of any region in the world. Now, if we're going to be able to tackle the climate challenge, what we need to do is have all countries accepting responsibility for meeting their fair share of the global effort to tackle the crisis. We know that some countries have much higher capacity to act than others. And this is largely due to the fact that they have higher income and wealth, and their level of development and access to technologies is greater. And we know that some countries have emitted a greater deal for a long period of time. and they thrive on infrastructure and institutions that they've been able to set up because of this. You know, the countries that people refer to as industrialized or developed countries have developed in part because the rest of the world have subsidized their development by allowing them, you know, by giving them a free pass to pollute. And so what we need to do here is that we need to be able to think through and push for the world to operationalize equity and fair shares, because that will allow us to focus on two things. One is on historical responsibility, and the second is on capacity. And these two things correspond with the core principles of the UN Climate Convention of common but differentiated responsibility and respective capability. And also, of course, the right to sustainable development. We need to take account of historical responsibility. And when I say historical responsibility, I'm talking about the contribution to climate change in terms of cumulative emissions since, you know, since pre-industrial period. So we can agree 1850, we can agree, you know, 1950 or even 1992. But if you define historical emissions, what you will realize that is that our continent, you know, has imprinted the lightest carbon footprint on this planet. And then the second thing is on capacity. And we're talking about here capacity to be able to take action. And we're using national income, you know, over what is needed, you know, what is, you know, the income that is beyond what is needed for providing basic standards of living as a principal indicator. So these two things will allow us to be able to actually apportion responsibility between all the countries of the world. Now, if you think about what the world agreed and was able to achieve in Paris in 2015, you know, the NDCs, you know, these NDCs cumulatively puts the world on a path to 3 degrees. And, you know, and that is only if these NDCs are implemented. And you know that, you know, the Paris Agreement has this overall goal of limiting, you know, global temperature rise to below 2 degrees and you know, pursuing further efforts to limit it to below 1.5. But the NDCs that the world was able to actually put together, you know, they barely contribute less than half of the reduction that are required by 2030 to put the world on a pathway to 2 degrees. And so as a continent, what we need to be continuously be pushing for is for justice, is for equity, is for sharing the effort fairly between all countries. This concept of fair shares or climate debt is critical, because what it does is it apportions the responsibility to those countries who've caused the problem and also those countries who have the greatest capacity. Now, coming to the transition to renewable energy, I think I want to make this point clear, that what we need first, and this is important to start with, is that those wealthy countries who have grown rich in part by polluting our atmosphere without, you know, facing any cost, needs to go to 100% renewable energy within 10 to 15 years. You know, those countries that have industrialized, that have grown rich, they need to lead and lead by taking action and transition into 100% renewable energy within 10 to 15 years. But they also need to simultaneously provide the means of implementation of support to developing countries, including Africa, so that we can also be able to undertake this transformation. And this is going to require specific transitions. Some developing countries, including our continent, I must say, are better positioned to undertake this transition than perhaps even wealthy countries. And the reason I say this is because we're not locked into fossil or obsolete infrastructure as much. But we require support. We require socially and environmentally appropriate technologies. We require international support through you know, the provision of climate finance. So that, and we need these things at a massive scale. So let's not you know, think that we can do this with the small billions that have been talked about. And this is not aid. You know, this is the other important point that I just want to make. The support that is needed to help Africa transition to 100% RE is not aid. This is rich countries paying their climate debt. But it's also something that is in their own national interest and the collective interest of the whole world. And this is primarily because we no longer have the atmospheric space for us to go down the fossil fuel path. If we were to go down the fossil route like the developed countries, we will not meet the 2-degree goal or the 1.5 degree that our continent, Africa, supports. Now, when it comes to the financial tools, I think there are different financial tools and mechanisms for massive cooperative scheme of transfers of financial resources. I think one thing is clear though, the role of public finance is absolutely critical. And I'm talking about the provision of public finance by the treasuries in the developed world. I think there must be a stop to this constant praising of private sector as drivers of development. I don't think we can be able to deliver this transition to 100% RE through the work that the private sector is doing. I think it's clearly a role for our government to set in place the policies, the rules, the regulations, the incentives, the fines, the sanctions that are needed to give clear directions and set in motion the rapid transformation that is needed. If COVID-19 crisis has shown anything, this is it, that it's the role of the government to actually lead in this effort. And it's also key to recognize that it's not only private for-profit, corporate interests that require the incentives and who the incentive must be directed to. I think there is an incredible, largely untapped potential for collective, non-profit maximizing approaches. Energy can be a leveler, for democratization, for community empowerment, for collective ownership. It can deliver good, common good solutions. We need cooperatives, we need public institutions, farmers, companies of all sizes. They can be producers and consumers of renewable energy. And so we must think about them and we must try and think about a broader mix of actors and owners of energy systems for us to be able to deliver the transition. Piecemeal approaches will not work. And I think it's important for me to say this clearly, that piecemeal approaches like the ones we've had these many decades will not work. We need concerted public efforts. We need genuine participation by all stakeholders, like what we had in the original efforts and ideas that were championed by Dr. Yuba Sokona here, when AREI, for example, was developed, and the work that is being done now through the LDC Ray. And they're also, these elements are also in the AfriTep initiative. And as somebody who has followed these initiatives closely and has actually published a paper reviewing these 3 particular initiatives that I will actually want to invite the audience to look at, I want to say that AREI has obviously gone terribly wrong, and perhaps it may even be beyond rescue. But the core ideas as originally formulated are as valid as ever. And if these ideas can be pursued, and I know they're being pursued through the LDC Ray, I think they will be able to help mobilize the transition, but also unlock the support that is required. And so in my view, these are the kind of approaches that are needed, which will allow us to be able to put forward a very bold initiative, but also initiatives that can also be backed up by the wealthy countries, those countries that have polluted. So we need to seize this moment and be able to lead through these initiatives and be able to actually resist neocolonial interference and manipulation, so that we can effectively be able to build real trusted cooperation, collaboration between ourselves as Africans, but also through African initiatives that helps to deliver the needs of this continent.
Okay, thank you very much for this inspiring idea. What I take from you, the important role of the government to enable this energy transition. Without government, I think support the transition will not be easy. And also I like the idea that many African countries, they can do energy transition somehow better than the other country who already locked in fossil fuel energy. But just one following question. Now, most of the discussion about other crises, health crisis, COVID-19, how we can put focus again on the climate change and all other issues, because now I think most of the discussion now diverted to the health crisis. How important to install the focus on the climate change and energy, and how we can achieve this during this pandemic.
Yeah, I think we're currently in an emergency, and so what is going to be pursued are largely emergency measures. And these emergency measures, like one of the speakers said earlier, is not going to be a vaccine for every crisis. And so what we need to be thinking about is we have the corona crisis, and it comes on top of a climate and an environmental crisis, which governments have not been doing nearly enough to tackle. And so there is a need, and a dire need, for a truly integrated, holistic response. If you take the example of what the UN Secretary General has been saying, he continuously says we need to recover better, that the economy and society we rebuild after this crisis must be more resilient, more environmentally sustainable, and more socially just. And so we have an opportunity now, because the extent to which we address the current pandemic largely depends on how well our continent and each of our countries are going to be powered. So energy is going to be a critical enabler to actually the response to the current pandemic. So it's imperative as Africans for us to actually approach these things in an integrated manner, in a holistic manner, and get away from the current conventional development economic growth approach, which we know have been proven to be unsustainable. This idea of unending overexploitation of natural resources, the destruction of our ecosystems, the unsustainable agricultural practices, this dependence on unreliable, inaccessible energy. These things are the things that are aggravating our climate, and that they're not also helping us create a more equal world. And so what we need to do is think about our environmental objectives, our social objectives, and then our health objectives. And then think of a way we can bring them closer together so that we can be able to build the resilience that is required in our societies, in our economies. I think the lack of preparedness for mega shocks in Africa has been exposed by COVID. And so learning from this experience, we need to be thinking about how this response to COVID is actually going to build our resilience so that we can withstand future threats and dangers, such as those posed by climate change. So let's have a forward-looking approach and think about the future and how we prepare ourselves for that changed future.
Okay, thank you very much, Mohammed. And I will hand over to Yuba.
Okay, just to let Mohammed know that all the ideas, the concept that developed in the African Renewable Energy Initiative is not lost. You can download a paper on the website of AFREC on designing the African energy transition and approach for social and economic transformation in a climate compatible manner. It has been captured, that is not lost, just to reassure you. Okay, let me go now to Dimitri, and I know that the time is running, and then I do have two very, very important and pressing questions. One is related to the fact that how to combine solving the most immediate problem with long-term strategy of energy transition, social and economic development in Africa, and then to bring in the issue of the issue of natural gas, if it's relevant in that context, and then how the finance and then could be mobilized in the current and then the post-COVID period. And then I know that those are difficult questions, but those emerge from the discussion. It emerged also from some of the questions that participants have indicated. Dimitri.
Hi.
Your micro is muted. Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much for this opportunity. And actually, a lot of ideas which I wanted to present already partly presented, and I'm very happy that we are talking here more or less in the same direction. So let me summarize my views and probably add something on natural gas and also on financial sources. So yeah, let me start my sharing screen. Yeah. 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 Well, we just discussed today that COVID is not a medicine, but in some sense, COVID-19 is kind of time machine. Certain things which we all expected, but expected in 2030, they're happening now. So basically, we should just expedite what we did before, and our strategic plans are becoming sometimes short-term plans. So we now need to combine our short-term measures with strategic vision, and we should tackle at the same time also climate change and adaptation, access to clean cooking for households, food for growing population in Africa. We need to be arranged now already, employment and local business opportunities for people in rural areas and in the cities. Also, of course, we need to address a lot of financial investment resources for energy and other projects. And there is a tool for decision making to make decisions under uncertainty to build strategic tools which we are applying. It's called real option analysis, where we're preparing for future decisions now already, so that management and decision makers can actually act efficiently when we see some new opportunities in the future, or if we face some difficulties. But following this approach, let's start with diagnostic, which we already done more or less. Yes, availability of electric power is extremely low in Africa, and we need to do something with this. It's not about transition, it's about development. We need to increase energy production by at least 3 to 5 times within very short time, just to catch up with social and economic development. Also, another important issue is availability of fertilizers and productivity of land. Because if our land is not used efficiently, then we don't have enough food, we don't have enough security, and we also have to cut our trees, which creates additional problems, which already was mentioned today. Also, another problem which is supposed to be actually solved yesterday is cooking with more healthy types of fuel. Again, technologies are available, but still, as you can see on this diagram, situation is not very good in Africa, and it's actually bad. And we need to solve this issue simultaneously with solving other problems. Deforestation creates big problems for everyone, and not only in Africa, actually, because rainforest in Africa and in South America is a carbon sink, which I think the whole world is interested in supporting. And of course, most importantly, we already know that population will be growing, and already today we have to prepare rural areas, we have to prepare cities to accommodate, to feed, and to provide human development to a much larger number of people. And all of this we have to do now. As was just mentioned by Mr. Ado, Africa is very vulnerable to climate change and actually probably pays the highest price for changing climate. It includes deforestation, it includes coastal erosion, it includes other negative consequences for entire population. At the same time, Africa is far from being the greatest emitter of carbon into atmosphere. It's actually, the share of Africa is actually very insignificant. At the same time, as I just mentioned, rainforests are actually one of the key carbon sinks, and Africa is one of the 2 continents where rainforests still exist, and we have to protect them. Natural gas is quite available in Africa. A lot of development projects, but what we can see that most of these projects were actually aimed at exporting natural gas or LNG, and using natural gas within the countries is actually not very active, and it should be improved and increased, because when we use this product for domestic purposes, we also switch on some microeconomic multiplication, so that we have more salaries, we have better conditions for living for people, and as a result, actually, we can, using this gas, we can turn around the whole continent and to leapfrog in many directions. Also, as everyone know, there is already now overproduction of LNG, and actually it's getting even worse with COVID-19. Prices are going down, so even larger companies were actually also interested in additional consumers, in access to customers. Most of them are not connected currently by pipelines, and raising finance to build new pipeline now is kind of complicated because of economic downturn. For that, there is solution called virtual pipeline. Basically, it uses cryogenic containers or cryogenic tanks to transport liquefied natural gas or methane from the ports, from production facilities, or to actually the place where it can be consumed. It can be consumed at households. It can be consumed for generation of electric power or for combined generation. It can be used to fuel vehicles, and also for chemical plants which are producing fertilizers close to the place where these fertilizers actually needed. For instance, urea, which I think would improve significantly fertility of arable land. So virtual pipelines have many advantages, and some of these advantages are actually quite becoming even more important now in this not in this complicated situation. For instance, size of the projects is different. It's not huge sometimes, and these projects can be implemented one by one, and raising finance is much easier than to raise finance compared to raising finance for trunk pipelines. Very fast implementation of virtual pipelines projects is also important now when we need some quick measures. So I would just like to draw your attention to this technology, which can really help to solve a lot of issues on the continent. I think everybody is saying now that natural gas is a bridge to renewables. But we need to understand how to cross this bridge. Basically, with use of natural gas, we can already now reduce emissions while at the same time ramping up production of electric energy. We can also create infrastructure which is much more suitable for renewable energy than centralized grid system. And as we will see later, virtual pipeline can also be used to process waste and convert this into energy and to some neutral or useful substances. First of all, with natural gas, it is possible to use combined cycle generation, which increases efficiency of electric power generation. Normally, with biomass, efficiency is in the range of 15, 20 to 25%. With combined cycle generation, which combines gas turbine and steam turbine, efficiency can be even above 60%. So we can get much more electric power from the same volume of fuel. Also, combined cycle turbines, gas turbines, they now can generate the cheapest electric power, so which makes electricity affordable. But of course, combined cycle generation is more suitable for larger projects, and larger projects, they're usually more expensive and they still require power transmission. But we can further increase efficiency if we switch, or if we, in addition to centralized power station, we can design combined cooling, heat and power generation centralized networks. In this case, we are not using just electric power, but we're also using efficiently heat, and this heat we also can convert into cooling. Of course, heat and cooling you cannot transport to longer distances, so it has to be decentralized. But providing cooling and heat for everyone, especially in rural areas, is good not just for healthcare, like it was mentioned previously today, but available cooling in rural areas also can open a lot of new business models for farmers, for food processing, because with cooling we can preserve stuff, we can keep it longer and accumulate, and then transship, so access to market also increasing. So with proliferation of decentralized combined cooling, heat and power generation can really change the game, especially in many rural areas inside the continent. Also, virtual pipelines, they create some options for the future, which we can use if it's profitable, or we can just drop if it doesn't work. I just bring here 3 examples. One of the examples is access to small-scale producers of gas. As everyone knows, like methane is much more aggressive greenhouse gas compared to carbon dioxide. That's why we can see everywhere with flaring of accompanying gas, because its volumes are too small to build pipelines, but too big just to emit to atmosphere. With virtual pipeline equipment, we can actually liquefy this gas and put this in our system and use efficiently. So as a result, we are not losing this energy, we are not polluting atmosphere with methane, and we also provide additional income stream for oil producing companies. Second option is biomass and waste management. Anaerobic digestion is a quite known technology, but unfortunately in some countries it's not used as much as it should be used. With anaerobic digestion, we can extract methane from wastewaters and waste, and this methane can also be used and consolidated and transported with virtual pipeline to our consumers. This also will help to solve waste problem of big cities. Actually, for anaerobic digestion, it's not even that important to sort waste, because co-digestion sometimes even more efficient than digestion of single type of waste. Also, it's it can be used to process wastewaters without drying and spending energy to dry wet waste or wastewaters. And biogas, as I said, is becoming more and more important source of electricity. There are some estimates that actually up to 10% of global demand for electricity can be satisfied with biogas, solving in parallel waste problem. The third real option is hydrogen. Hydrogen currently is too expensive to produce. Also, efficiency of this conversion, like hydrogen into electric power, is also not very good. because electrolysis has efficiency of say 95%, then combustion of hydrogen has the same 60%. So as a result, like it's much less efficient than battery charge-discharge cycle. But technologies are being developed, and with combined generation, hydrogen can become actually fuel of choice. And this also requires cryogenic technologies, which will be developed through implementation of virtual pipelines. So in the future, when and if hydrogen will become efficient, our technologies which we develop for methane with virtual pipeline will be well used. Also, as I said, there are more opportunities which can be achieved through using virtual pipelines. This is, for instance, production of fertilizers. This is transportation of LNG to the areas where pipelines still not existent because of lack of finance or because of not solved right-of-way issues or something else. Also, what is good about virtual pipelines using the same roads and railroads. So the money which are paid for transportation, they are not paid to pipeline companies located far away, but this money are paid to operators of roads and railroads locally. So at the same time, we are providing electricity, we are providing energy, and at the same time, we are improving or supporting our roads and railroads, which can be used for all sorts of other uses, for other businesses, for other cargo, for passengers. So virtual pipelines, they provide benefits for communities. And this is a really big difference with trunk networks or trunk pipelines. And in this sense, with virtual pipelines, natural gas or methane is really becoming a bridge to sustainable economy. Because if you implement widely this virtual pipeline system, we build in parallel with cogeneration equipment, we build decentralized networks, which are very suitable for renewable energy. So as a result, we can stop at some point, we can reduce extracting hydrocarbons from the ground, but we can only use methane, which is extracted from waste. Plus, gradually we can move to hydrogen. To start with projects, basically there are certain steps which we already designed. First, of course, we need to agree with all stakeholders project selection criteria. Then we start screening, selecting, and prioritization of project opportunities in Africa, review stakeholders' interests and engage stakeholders, fine-tune our business models for each specific case, which is doable for virtual pipeline. And then we basically can follow standard route of any EPC projects. Currently, it's a good time to actually select suppliers, because all of them are interested in participation in this market. This is just a list of suppliers with whom we worked and who are really interested in entering this small-scale generation, cogeneration, and virtual pipeline networks. This includes companies producing trucks and engines. This includes also companies which are producing vessels for seas and for rivers, also financial institutions. And now, given this economic downturn, all these manufacturers were actually not in a good shape because demand is going down. It's actually started going down even before, as you can see, for turbines, and it's even in a low level now. So for them actually just to survive, it's important to produce and to sell their equipment to someone. As a result, now it's a really good time to get very beneficial terms in terms of pricing, in terms of financial conditions. and this time we should not lose. Raising finance opportunities for these projects also multiple. This includes, of course, as I mentioned, ECA export credit agencies, also international lending agencies. Potentially, there is potential for public-private partnership and for new instruments such as bonds and green bonds. And as we just discussed previously, also this potentially carbon pricing mechanism should result in some funds for virtual pipeline projects. To be successful in implementation virtual pipelines, it's important to have innovative culture, understanding commodity market. Also, it's important to understand future technology trends. It's important to have scale. So we have many projects, smaller projects, but we have to do several projects simultaneously. And it's important to have global reach, project management expertise, and financial and human resources. So this is basically all my short speech. I just wanted to draw your attention to virtual pipelines and how these virtual pipelines can be used not just to provide energy, but how to build infrastructure suitable for renewable energy in the future, and also why it is doable now. I mean, implementation of virtual pipelines. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you, Dimitri, for a lot of information in a very condensed period of time. And then the problem is that we have the constraint of time and how to manage it, and it is not easy. And there is a lot of questions related to the COVID as a catalyst on the legal issues of renewable energy, on institutional aspect, on partnership, on decarbonizing the power sector, and so on and so forth. What I will do before handing over to Rashid is to ask each of the panelists if you can just, from what you have taken in the Q&A part, just 2 key words that highlight some of the issues. Let me start with Sue.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I wanted to make a quick focus on the role of renewable energy to contribute to the development of the energy sector in Africa, taking into account this crisis. There in West Africa, in Ivory Coast, there has now been, some specific, plan for renewable energy and energy due to the COVID-19. But main of the recovery plan that were put in place was to support the economy, to support the informal economy, to support the SMEs, to support the sector that has been, largely impacted by the COVID-19. During this crisis, the need to be able to address or to respond to the energy demand was even more important due to some, examples that I gave before in order to telework, in order to teleschool. Even if at the beginning of the crisis, some of the industries stops, now they are reopened, they restart. So the need to provide energy is still very important. And so I would say that the energy industry has not suffered so much during this crisis because they have been working a lot, even though if they had to adapt due to the different measures that were put in place. So what has suffered a little was all the programs that were considered in line with the energy policies to work on the implementation of new infrastructures. For example, in Ivory Coast, they have the target within 2025 to double, to multiply by 2 the energy generation capacity and to integrate 42% of renewable energy. If I take out of this 42% the hydroelectricity, it remains 16% for renewable energy, mainly based on solar, PV, and on biomass. And one of the sector I would like to highlight a little bit is the biomass. I think that a lot of our country in Africa, in a lot of our country in Africa, the economy is relying on agriculture, agro-industry. So there is here a huge opportunity for the development, I would say, of biomass projects. For instance, in Ivory Coast, in partnership with the government, we are developing what will be the biggest and the first large biomass project, a 46 megawatt project, that will produce energy with palm oil leaves. So, and because those leaves are organic waste that are not used and that we can find in huge quantity, and that we need to implement a logistic to collect this biomass. We need a logistic to collect this biomass, and in order for I would say biomass plant to convert those palm oil leaves into electricity. And what is really interesting in this kind of project is that first, the fuel is local, it's palm oil leaves. Second, the logistic will create a lot of work because we will have, for instance, to create more than 1,000 works to address the logistic challenges, to mobilize 500,000 tons of biomass into the plant. So, and second, it is the kind of renewable energy project in which we are not importing a technology from, I would say, Europe to Africa. We are adapting an existing technology, taking into account the local and the local problem, and with, I would say, the local solutions. Nowhere in the world we are doing biomass transformation with palm oil leaves. Ivory Coast is one of the important producers in palm oil, so it makes a lot of sense to consider those kind of projects. I would say in Africa, it creates really an economic circular, because why? We are going to work with farmers, to work with the outgrowers, to get the palm oil leaves. So we are going to pay them. So we are going to generate additional revenues into the agriculture industry in order to produce energy. So in terms of local content, in terms of economical content, I would say those kind of projects will, I would say, totally integrate the local people. And I think this is something really important. That's something you don't have when you are considering other technology, for instance, like solar, because you're importing all the equipment. Most of the EPC also contractor, there is no, at the moment, some African EPC contractors that are, I would say, able to address 100% those kind of projects. So with those kind of projects, there is much more, I would say, content. You are creating synergy between agriculture and energy. And for instance, in Ivory Coast, they have considered that 8% of their energy electricity mix will rely on this sector, not only considering palm oil leaves, it will also consider cocoa, it will also consider others culture. So for me, that's really an opportunity to integrate. And this COVID-19 has created some delays on the implementation of this project, but they are still, I would say, under
Okay, I'm sorry because we have a time constraint. And then the other, can you just say 2 words because we really are far, far beyond the time. Diko?
Yes, I've seen a comment by Jeremy reminding us that there is a growing market for air conditioning and that the training and the capacities, technical capacities that are needed for maintaining air conditioners and fridges is the same technicity. Then there is an opportunity for to leverage that capacity and use it for the health sector also. This is something good. I would like just to say something to Mohammed about his insistence on government and the fact that piecemeal approaches won't work. I don't know if he noticed that in Mali we have no government for more than 1 month now, and also that's a joke. But regarding the need to work together, Yuba might remember the CRES, the Regional Center for Solar Energy here in Bamako, and we had made all the studies necessary to build a regional solar panel production facility here in Bamako for the entire West African region. And we went all the way through up to the selection of the international partners, and then it was sabotaged and it was dropped. That was in '87. We are 33 years after that, and there is still no similar approach. So this is really something to think about. Thank you.
Mohammed?
Yeah, I'll say, I think the challenge in Africa is massive, but so are the opportunities. Our continent has the benefit of being a latecomer, so we can easily leapfrog to, smart distributed energy systems of the future, and can easily bypass locking ourselves into stranded assets. On the challenge, around, our leaders providing that kind of leadership, I think the thing I'll say about that is that they haven't yet internalized what is at stake. I don't think any of our heads of state gets enough. The climate challenge this continent faces, the energy access crisis that we're facing, and the opportunity, if we actually dealt with these things together, presents. So what we need to be doing, I think, is building political support for the vision that we've collectively articulated here, but also try and build grassroots demand. Because at the end of the day, we need to motivate the masses so that the policies and the investments that are needed to advance the zero carbon or the low carbon development and to shift away from fossil fuels, but also address the energy poverty can be realized. So we need to focus on the political leadership and build political support, but at the same time, I think resource and support the grassroots so that they can make these demands. And then the general, non-state actors, I think there is also a capacity deficit. So we need to be thinking about how do we support these non-state actors so that they can be able to deliver more effective advocacy. They failed over the years. And so what is the kind of knowledge exchange that is required between different stakeholders in the continent? What is the kind of public participations that are required that facilitates buy-in to our vision and supporting it so that we can actually land it? So I think while I totally acknowledge that the challenge ahead of us is massive, I will also say the opportunities are equally massive. And so what we need is more decisive leadership that actually takes these things to the public.
Before handing to Dimitri and Rashid, there is an African Union Commission and UNDP African Young Women Leaders Fellow and PhD candidate. She wants to bring the issue of household energy. We already discussed that during the last meeting, but let me give to her a floor for 2 minutes. This is Amadou Munira. Dimitri, can you give to her a floor?
Amadou, can you speak now?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for giving me the floor. And I actually reacted since the start of the discussion. It was a really interesting discussion. And I was actually struck by the male dominance of this panel, and it made me want to contribute in the direction of gender and energy access, since this is what we're discussing, you know, enhancing energy access throughout Africa. And I believe that since in Africa, women are household energy leaders, we need to be aware that whenever we want to brainstorm or design any strategies involving, for instance, green microfinance enhanced by digital technology, we have to take into account gender mainstreaming. So we have to put women and specifically young women, you know, at the forefront of any discussions related to brainstorming or to thinking about what is the way forward in terms of the energy sector, and specifically promoting renewable energy or any other type of sustainable development pathway. So this is not only for community projects when we think of clean cooking solutions, but also, and most importantly, really enhancing the participation of women, and specifically young women, in decision-making positions, be it in local or national, regional, and continental energy governance spheres. So I would really like that for the next, I know this is a series of webinars, so I would really be happy if in the next webinar we would have at least 50%, you know, of the panel being females. So that would be great, you know, contributing or promoting really the participation of women in such interesting discussions. And thank you all for your contributions.
You are right, and we'll do it. But in the previous panel, the next one will be only women. There will be no men.
I missed the other one.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
And then Dimitri, and then Rashid.
Hello.
Yes.
Yeah. So thank you again for this opportunity. Yes, I agree with what was said previously. What I would add, I think we need to start with some pilot projects because more or less all of us understand what to do. So now what we need is actually to start screening and supporting projects in countries and the regions, and just start making practical steps in implementation of the ideas which we just discussed. So this is my proposal. Probably we need to set up kind of incubator or something, but it's not innovation. It's basically, it's all already innovated. We just need to implement this new energy solution, implement this, as I said, virtual pipelines. There are more technologies like this, which don't require huge capital expenditure, but can make big change if it's implemented widely. So my proposal is, again, to start screening for the project and start supporting real projects in Africa.
Okay, thank you. And Rashid, you can sum up.
So now we come to an end.
Yeah, unfortunately.
In fact, we have a lot of interesting questions, which I think it is important, but the time it is limited. But we will include it in the reports, and we will try to circulate it to the panelists so that they can answer. So I think everyone who asks questions, he will receive an answers. And as we mentioned before, this series of webinar, we will make sure that this question will be addressed in the coming webinar. As the final, I think I would like to thank you all for all participants to join us in the second webinar, and also the way of engagement. It is very interesting, and the questions, unfortunately, the time is limited, and we think that this webinars is give us the guides or the way forward for us even to adapt ourselves, how we think about our program, how we adjust our action plan so that it can fit the real needs that given by our expert across the continent. Last but not least, I would like to thank all panelists who share with us their experience and the insightful opinion. I would like to thank Dr. Yuba for co-moderating with me this webinar. And thank you very much, and see you soon. Of course, we will announce another series of webinar. So we will reach you very soon. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. And see you next time. And I want to thank also the panelists. And this has been excellent. And unfortunately, time is a big constraint. And then to Amadou, the next one, there will be only women on the panel. Even the moderator will be women. Thank you and bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.